Commander Zekthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another defense station explode into fragments. The Vrexian Empire was winning, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His fleet had been fighting for 3 weeks without rest, and they were losing badly. The situation was desperate. The Altharian commander's 4 arms moved across the control panels as he tried to coordinate what remained of his forces. Ships from a dozen different species fought together under the coalition banner, but it wasn't enough. The Vrexians had numbers, they had better weapons, and they had momentum. Zekthor had already lost 60% of his fleet. The 3 planets in the Calric system would fall within days if help didn't arrive soon. Send the emergency signal, Zekthor ordered his communications officer. Request immediate reinforcements from Coalition Command. Mark it as critical priority. The young officer's scales turned pale with worry. Commander, Central Command has no reserves available. Every fleet is engaged elsewhere. The Vrexians are pushing on all fronts. Zekthor's jaw tightened. He had fought in 17 campaigns over his 40-year career, but he had never seen an enemy this relentless. The Vrexians didn't just want to win territory. They wanted to break the coalition completely. Send it anyway. Someone has to answer. 3 hours later, the response came. Zekthor read the message twice, unable to believe what he was seeing. Earth is sending forces? The humans? His second officer, a Peltharian named Vrix, made a clicking sound that indicated confusion. Humans? Those primitive creatures that just joined the coalition last year? What can they possibly do? Zekthor had never met a human, but he knew the basic facts. Earth was a recent addition to the galactic community. They had only developed faster-than-light travel 15 years ago. Their technology was generations behind most coalition species. They were small, physically weak compared to proper warriors, and they came from a heavy gravity world that made them slow and clumsy in normal environments. Central Command says, "They're sending a Special Forces unit," Zekthor said, though his voice held no hope. 50 soldiers. 50? Vrix's translator couldn't hide his disbelief. We need 50,000. What are they thinking? They're thinking it's better than nothing, Zekthor replied. He turned back to the tactical display, watching red enemy markers outnumber blue friendly forces by 3 to 1. Prepare to receive them, but don't expect miracles. The human transport ship arrived 2 days later. Zekthor watched from the observation deck as the small vessel approached. It was called the Harbinger, and it looked like something from a museum. The hull was scarred and patched, the design inefficient by modern standards. This was Earth's idea of a military transport? When the humans finally came aboard, Zekthor felt his hopes sink even further. They were tiny. The tallest human barely reached his chest, and Zekthor was considered short for an Altharian. They wore simple armor that looked primitive compared to Coalition standard equipment. Their weapons were ballistic projectile throwers, a technology most species had abandoned centuries ago in favor of energy weapons. The human leader stepped forward and saluted. Captain Jake Morrison, Earth Defense Force, reporting as ordered, sir. Zekthor studied the human carefully. Morrison had brown hair cut short, calm blue eyes, and a jaw that looked like it had been broken and healed at least once. Despite his small size, he moved with confidence. Behind him stood 49 other humans, all watching with alert expressions. Captain Morrison, Zekthor said, keeping his voice neutral, I appreciate Earth's willingness to help, but I must be honest. The situation here is extremely dangerous. We're facing an enemy force that outnumbers us significantly. I cannot guarantee your safety. Morrison smiled, which confused Zekthor. Why would he smile at such news? Commander, we're not here to be safe. We're here to fight. Show us where you need us. A woman stepped forward, her red hair pulled back in a tight braid. Lieutenant Amy Brooks, sir, tactical specialist. If you could brief us on enemy positions and capabilities, we can start planning operations immediately. Zekthor led them to the briefing room, where holographic displays showed the tactical situation. It looked even worse when viewed all together. The Vrexians controlled orbital space around 2 of the 3 planets. Ground forces were trapped on multiple worlds. Supply lines were cut. The coalition was being strangled slowly. The Vrexians fight in coordinated waves, Zekthor explained. They overwhelm defensive positions through superior numbers. Their soldiers are heavily armored and use advanced energy shields. They prefer direct assault tactics. A large human with darker skin and extensive scars on his hands leaned forward. What about night operations? Do they fight at night? Sergeant Chris Taylor, Morrison introduced. Weapons specialist. Night operations? Zekthor's translator struggled with the question. Most species prefer to fight during daylight hours. The Vrexians are no exception. Why do you ask? Taylor glanced at Morrison with what looked like amusement. Just curious, sir. Another human, a woman with dark hair and a medical insignia on her uniform, studied the casualty reports. Dr. Lisa Grant, combat medic. What's causing most coalition casualties? Direct combat primarily, Zekthor answered. The Vrexians are excellent shots. Also, their advance is so fast that wounded soldiers often cannot be evacuated in time. Lisa nodded slowly, making notes on a small device. What about environmental hazards? Radiation, toxins, extreme temperatures? This sector has several zones that are dangerous, Zekthor admitted. There's a manufacturing complex on Dracor Prime that leaked radiation after being bombed. We've had to route around it. No one can survive in that area for more than a few minutes without special equipment. The humans exchanged looks that Zekthor couldn't interpret. Morrison turned back to the display. Commander, we'll need detailed maps of all combat zones, including the hazardous areas. Also current enemy patrol patterns and shift schedules. Shift schedules? Vrix interrupted. The Vrexians don't operate on shifts during an active campaign. They maintain constant pressure. Then we need to know when they eat, sleep, and resupply, Amy Brooks said firmly. Every army has patterns. We just need to find them. Zekthor assigned the humans to forward operating Base Sentinel on Dracor Prime. It was the most threatened position, holding the last major coalition presence on the planet. If it fell, the entire world would be lost. He didn't expect the humans to make a difference, but at least they seemed willing to try. That night, Zekthor couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the 50 humans now on the front lines. They seemed confident, almost eager, which made no sense. Didn't they understand how dangerous this was? Didn't they realize they were probably going to die? His console chimed with an incoming message. It was from Captain Morrison at Base Sentinel. Commander, requesting permission to conduct night patrol in Sector 7. Zekthor checked the map. Sector 7 was where the Vrexians had been advancing steadily for the past week. 3 coalition battalions had failed to hold that ground. Captain, I don't advise that position. The terrain is difficult, and the Vrexians have been very active there. Understood, sir. That's exactly why we want to patrol it. The Vrexians won't expect activity at night. Captain, night operations are extremely dangerous. Most species have limited vision in darkness. How will your soldiers see? There was a pause, then Morrison responded with that same confusing tone of amusement. Sir, humans evolved as nocturnal hunters. Our night vision is quite good, we'll be fine. Before Zekthor could argue further, alarms blared throughout the ship. The Vrexians were launching another assault, this time a massive night attack against Base Sentinel. Zekthor pulled up the tactical feed, his heart sinking. The Vrexians had committed 3 full regiments. Base Sentinel's defenders were already falling back. Get me Morrison, Zekthor ordered. The human captain appeared on the screen, and behind him, Zekthor could see his soldiers moving with purposeful calm. We see them, Commander. We're already in position. Captain, you need to evacuate. There are too many. Negative, sir. We volunteered for this. We're going to hold Sector 7. Morrison looked directly at the camera, and for the first time, Zekthor saw something in those human eyes that made him pause. It wasn't fear or bravado. It was the calm certainty of a predator that had spotted prey. Besides, Morrison added, they made a mistake attacking at night. This is when humans hunt best. The connection cut off as the battle began. Zekthor watched the tactical display, expecting to see the human positions overrun within minutes. Instead, something impossible happened. The Vrexian advance stopped. Then it slowed. Then, incredibly, it began to fall back. Confused reports came from coalition observers. The humans were moving through the darkness like ghosts, hitting Vrexian positions from unexpected angles. They moved faster than should be possible in low light. They coordinated without visible communication, and they fought with a ferocity that shocked everyone watching. By dawn, Sector 7 was still in coalition hands. The Vrexians had retreated, leaving behind equipment and even some wounded. The humans had held a position that 3 coalition battalions couldn't defend, and they had done it with just 50 soldiers. Zekthor stared at the reports in disbelief. The humans had 0. The morning after the night battle, every soldier at Forward Operating Base Sentinel wanted to see the humans. Stories had spread quickly through the coalition forces. 50 human soldiers had held Sector 7 against 3 Vrexian regiments. They had fought in complete darkness like it meant nothing. They had moved through the battlefield like hunting animals, silent and deadly. Private Keln, a young Altharian, barely 3 cycles old, stood near the human barracks with a group of other soldiers. They watched as the humans emerged for morning duties. The creatures looked so ordinary. They were small with soft skin and no natural armor. Their bodies seemed fragile compared to proper warriors. Yet these same beings had accomplished what seemed impossible just hours ago. One of the humans noticed the watching crowd and walked over. He was shorter than most of his companions, with light brown skin and a friendly expression. "Morning. I'm Private Danny Wright. You guys need something?" Keln's translator struggled with the casual tone, but he understood enough. "We wanted to thank you. You saved my brother last night. He was trapped in Sector 7. Danny's face brightened. "The kid with the blue scales? He's a tough one. Didn't complain once while we got him out. How's his leg? The medics say he'll recover fully." Keln hesitated, then asked the question everyone wanted answered. "How did you see in the darkness?" "Even with night vision equipment, most of us were nearly blind." "Oh, that." Danny laughed. "We don't need equipment. Human eyes adapted for low light naturally. On Earth, our ancestors hunted at dawn and dusk when other predators couldn't see well. It gave us an advantage." A Peltharian soldier stepped forward. "But you moved so fast. The report said you covered ground at speeds that should be impossible for a species your size." "We're persistence hunters," Danny explained. He seemed to enjoy talking about this. "Humans can run for hours without stopping. On Earth, we used to hunt by just chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're not fast in short bursts, but we never stop." The concept confused Keln. He had never heard of a species that hunted by simply outlasting their prey. It seemed inefficient. But then nothing about humans seemed to follow normal logic. Jake Morrison appeared and called to Danny. "Right, stop bothering the locals. We've got a briefing in 5 minutes." "Yes, sir." Danny waved to the gathered soldiers and jogged away, his movements easy and relaxed despite having fought all night without sleep. The briefing room was crowded. Commander Zekthor had called together all senior officers to discuss the new situation. The humans sat on one side, looking comfortable despite being surrounded by beings twice their size. Coalition officers studied them with new respect and considerable curiosity. Zekthor gestured to the tactical display. "The Vrexian assault last night was a probing attack. They were testing our defenses. Now they know we can respond at night, which will change their tactics." He looked at Morrison. "Captain, your performance exceeded all expectations. However, I need to understand your capabilities better. What else can your soldiers do that we should know about?" Morrison glanced at his team before answering. "Sir, humans are generalists. We adapt to different environments quickly. We have good endurance, decent strength for our size, and we heal relatively fast. We're also comfortable operating independently or in small groups." Amy Brooks added, "We're particularly good at irregular warfare. Ambushes, raids, defensive positions, that kind of thing. On Earth, humans fought each other for thousands of years. We learned a lot about combat." "Thousands of years?" A Dracorian officer sounded shocked. "You fought amongst yourselves for thousands of years?" "Still do sometimes," Sergeant Chris Taylor said with a slight smile. "Humans are really good at 2 things, cooperating with allies and fighting enemies. Often we're not sure which is which until the shooting starts." The joke fell flat, but Taylor didn't seem bothered. He pulled up a data file on his handheld device. "Commander, I reviewed your intelligence on Vrexian equipment. Their armor is impressive, but it's designed to stop energy weapons. Our ballistic weapons punch right through it." Ballistic weapons are obsolete, the Dracorian officer protested. Primitive. Primitive but effective, Taylor replied. Energy shields disperse heat and directed energy. They don't do much against a metal slug traveling at 3,000 meters per second. Besides, our ammunition doesn't need to recharge. We can keep firing as long as we have bullets. Zekthor saw the logic. The Vrexians had built their entire military doctrine around energy weapons. They probably had never faced sustained ballistic fire. Interesting. What about the radiation zone I mentioned? The contaminated manufacturing complex? Lisa Grant, the human medic, responded. We can operate there with minimal protection. Human bodies are remarkably resistant to radiation compared to most species. Earth has higher background radiation than most habitable worlds. We evolved with it. You evolved on a radioactive planet? The Dracorian officer seemed horrified. Earth isn't that radioactive, Lisa corrected. But yes, more than most worlds. Our cells have robust repair mechanisms. We can handle short-term exposure to levels that would kill other species. Zekthor was beginning to understand something important. Humans came from what the Coalition classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. That meant Earth had multiple characteristics that made it extremely dangerous. He had assumed that made humans weak, struggling survivors. But it was the opposite. Humans were strong because their world was deadly. They had to be tough to survive. Captain Morrison, I'm assigning your team to patrol duties across multiple sectors. I want to test your capabilities in different environments. Zekthor pulled up a map showing various terrain types. Can your soldiers operate in extreme heat? Cold, toxic atmospheres? Yes to all three, Morrison answered without hesitation. We'll need to check the specific toxins, but humans have good chemical tolerance. Temperature range isn't a problem. Earth has environments from -40 to +50 Celsius. We're adapted for variety. Over the next 3 days, the humans proved every claim. Zekthor sent them into situations that would challenge experienced coalition troops, and the humans handled each one easily. They patrolled through a swamp where the atmosphere contained sulfur compounds that made most species violently ill. The humans wore simple breathing filters and reported the smell was unpleasant but manageable. They held a position in the frozen northern region where temperatures dropped to -30 Celsius. While coalition soldiers huddled in heated shelters, the humans simply added extra clothing and continued working. They entered the radiation-contaminated manufacturing zone that had been abandoned for weeks. A Peltharian science team went with them, wearing full protective suits. The humans wore light gear and stayed for 3 hours, gathering intelligence on Vrexian movements. They returned with minor radiation exposure that their own medic treated with simple medication. But the most impressive demonstration came during a rescue mission. A coalition patrol had been ambushed in rough terrain 15 kilometers from base. The survivors were trapped, surrounded by Vrexian forces. The terrain was too difficult for vehicles, and the Vrexians controlled the airspace. Any rescue attempt would take hours to organize and would likely fail. Morrison volunteered his team immediately. We can be there in 90 minutes and on foot? Zekthor checked the map. Captain, that's 15 kilometers through mountainous terrain. Human soldiers can march 30 kilometers in a day with full equipment, Amy Brooks said. 15 is nothing, especially if coalition lives are at stake. They left immediately, moving at a pace that shocked the observers. Humans didn't run fast, but they ran steadily, never slowing or stopping. They carried weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, and extra equipment. Yet they maintained the same rhythm kilometer after kilometer. Keln watched them disappear into the distance, still running after 30 minutes. How do they do that? Don't they get tired? Humans invented something called a marathon, one of the other soldiers said, reading from a data file. It's a race where they run 42 kilometers. Some humans do this for fun. For fun. The humans reached the trapped patrol in 87 minutes, faster than promised. They attacked the Vrexian position from an unexpected angle, using the terrain for cover. The Vrexians, already tired from hours of siege, couldn't respond effectively to the aggressive human assault. Chris Taylor led the attack with textbook precision, his team moving like they had trained together for years. They communicated in short phrases, each soldier knowing instinctively where the others would be. It was pack-hunting behavior, Zekthor realized. These humans fought like Earth's predators, coordinated and relentless. The Vrexians retreated after 20 minutes of intense combat. The humans secured the position, treated the wounded coalition soldiers, and prepared to move back to base. But there was a problem. 3 of the Coalition soldiers were too injured to walk, and 2 were too large for humans to carry easily. "We'll need transport," the trapped patrol leader said. "It will take hours to get vehicles here." "No need," Danny Wright said. He and 3 other humans rigged a makeshift stretcher from local materials. "We'll carry them." "Carry them? 15 kilometers? Sure. Humans used to carry wounded comrades for days when necessary. This is nothing." The war was changing, and the Vrexian Empire was beginning to notice. Reports came back from the front lines that confused their commanders. Small groups of Coalition soldiers were operating where they shouldn't be able to survive. They moved through hazardous zones without proper equipment. They fought at night with precision. They never seemed to tire or retreat. The Vrexians increased their attacks, trying to crush these mysterious new forces, but the humans kept adapting, kept surviving, kept winning. Corporal Sam Hughes crouched behind a broken wall in what used to be a chemical processing plant. The air here was thick with toxic fumes that made his eyes water and his throat burn. His breathing mask filtered out the worst of it, but he could still taste metal on his tongue. Behind him, 3 other humans waited for his signal. "Vrexian patrol approaching," he whispered into his communicator. 4 soldiers heavily armed. "They don't think anyone can operate in this environment." Amy Brooks's voice came back through his earpiece. "They're right about most species. Good thing you're human. Wait until they're in the kill zone, then light them up." Sam watched the Vrexian soldiers through his rifle scope. They moved casually, weapons lowered, completely unprepared for combat. Why would they be ready? This area was contaminated with industrial chemicals that caused respiratory failure in most oxygen-breathing species. The Vrexians wore full environmental suits, confident that no one else could survive here. But humans had lived with industrial pollution for centuries on Earth. They had built factories that poisoned their own air, then adapted to breathe it anyway. Sam's grandfather had worked in chemical plants his whole life. This atmosphere was nasty, but it wasn't deadly, not to a human. "Now," Sam ordered. 4 rifles fired simultaneously. The Vrexian soldiers dropped before they could react. Sam and his team moved forward quickly, checking the bodies and gathering intelligence. They had 3 minutes before reinforcements arrived. That was enough time. They found data devices, communication equipment, and map coordinates. Sam stuffed everything into his pack and signaled retreat. His team disappeared back into the toxic haze, invisible to enemy sensors designed to track living beings in normal environments. 20 minutes later, Sam reported to Amy Brooks at the forward command post. She studied the captured intelligence with satisfaction. "This is good. We now know their supply route through the eastern sector. They thought it was safe because the radiation levels are too high for normal operations. Want me to scout it?" Sam offered. "Already sent Kevin Barnes and his team. If the radiation is as bad as reports suggest, they'll need medical monitoring. Lisa is going with them." Lieutenant Kevin Barnes was an engineer before joining the military. He understood radiation better than most soldiers, which made him perfect for this mission. He led his team through the abandoned industrial complex, watching his radiation meter climb steadily. "Yellow zone. Orange zone. Red zone. We should turn back," one of his team members said nervously. "Exposure at these levels is dangerous." "For long term, yes," Lisa Grant replied. She was monitoring all their vital signs with medical scanners. "But humans can handle short-term exposure. Our cells have good repair mechanisms. We'll be fine for a few hours." They pushed deeper into the complex, following the route marked on the captured maps. Sure enough, they found evidence of Vrexian supply movements. The enemy was using this radiation zone as a safe corridor, assuming no one could follow them. "Set charges," Kevin ordered. "We'll collapse the tunnel at 3 points. That will cut their supply line and force them to use exposed routes. Working in a radiation field hot enough to kill most Coalition species within minutes. The humans calmly placed explosives and rigged detonators. Kevin double-checked each charge personally, making sure they would fire in the correct sequence. The work took 90 minutes. When they emerged from the complex, Lisa ran medical scans on everyone. Elevated exposure, but within acceptable limits. You'll all need treatment and a week of light duty, but no permanent damage. "Worth it," Kevin said. "When those charges blow, the Vrexians are going to have serious supply problems." Jake Morrison approved the mission results and immediately began planning the next operation. The humans had proven they could survive in environments that stopped everyone else. Now it was time to use that advantage strategically. The Vrexians control a spaceport on the eastern continent. he explained to his assembled soldiers. It's their main logistics hub for this entire sector. Coalition Command says it's too heavily defended to assault. But, Chris Taylor prompted, recognizing his captain's tone. But it's built in a volcanic region. The approach routes go through areas with high sulfur dioxide levels and extreme temperatures. The Vrexians think they're safe because no one can reach them through that terrain. No one except humans, Danny Wright said with a grin. Exactly. We're going to march through the volcanic badlands, hit the spaceport before they know we're coming, and blow their logistics operation to hell. The plan was insane by normal military standards. The volcanic region was officially classified as uninhabitable. Heat, toxic gases, and unstable terrain made it deadly to most life forms. But humans had lived near volcanoes on Earth for thousands of years. Some human cultures considered volcanic regions sacred. They were dangerous, yes, but survivable. The team of 30 humans set out 3 days later. They wore heat-resistant clothing and breathing filters, carried extra water, and moved during the cooler evening hours. The terrain was brutal. Jagged rocks tore at their boots. Steam vents erupted without warning. The air temperature climbed above 45 Celsius during the day, but they kept moving. Humans had crossed deserts, climbed mountains, and explored Arctic wastes on Earth. They had survived because they were too stubborn to quit. This volcanic hellscape was just another environment to adapt to. On the second day, they encountered unexpected resistance. A Vrexian scouting party had spotted them from the air. The enemy soldiers landed their transport and moved to intercept, clearly not believing anyone could actually be traveling through this region. The battle was short and brutal. The Vrexians wore full environmental suits that made them slow and clumsy. The humans, adapted to the heat and toxins, moved freely. Chris Taylor led the ambush personally, using the terrain like he was born there. Flank left, he ordered. Danny, take your fire team up that ridge. Sam, suppress their position from here. I'm going straight in. The tactics were pure human aggression. While most species would establish defensive positions and call for support, humans attacked immediately. They used the volcanic terrain as cover, moving through steam clouds and across sharp rocks without hesitation. One Vrexian soldier tried to retreat to higher ground. Danny and his team cut him off, appearing through a sulfur cloud like ghosts. The enemy never had a chance. Clear, Chris reported. No survivors. They didn't get a transmission out. The team continued toward the spaceport. By the third day, they could see their target in the distance. The Vrexian facility was massive, with defensive walls, anti-aircraft batteries, and hundreds of soldiers. A frontal assault would be suicide for a normal force. But the humans didn't plan a frontal assault. They waited until night, then infiltrated through the volcanic terrain that the Vrexians had dismissed as impassable. Kevin Barnes used his engineering knowledge to identify weak points in the facility's defenses. Lisa Grant confirmed that all team members were healthy enough for combat, despite 3 days of extreme environmental exposure. At midnight, the attack began. 30 humans struck 6 different targets simultaneously. They moved with perfect coordination, each team knowing exactly what the others were doing without constant communication. It was that pack-hunting instinct again. Zekthor would have recognized it instantly. Danny's team hit the fuel depot. Sam's team destroyed the command center. Kevin's team sabotaged the landing pads. Chris Taylor personally led the assault on the ammunition storage. The explosions lit up the night sky. Secondary detonations followed as stored fuel and weapons cooked off. The Vrexians tried to respond, but they were fighting enemies that seemed to be everywhere at once. The humans struck from shadows, disappeared when pursued, and reappeared somewhere else. Within an hour, the spaceport was completely destroyed. The humans regrouped at the extraction point, tired but victorious. They had casualties this time. 3 soldiers were wounded, including Danny, who had taken shrapnel to his leg, but they had won. A force of 30 humans had destroyed a facility that coalition military analysts said would require a full battalion to assault. The Vrexian supply line for the entire sector was crippled. When they returned to base, stories of the raid spread quickly. Coalition soldiers talked about the humans who marched through volcanic wastelands, who fought in toxic atmospheres, who never stopped until the mission was complete. More humans arrived from Earth over the following weeks. Not thousands, as Zekthor had requested, but hundreds, and each one proved just as capable as Morrison's original team. They spread out across the combat zones, taking positions that other soldiers couldn't hold, operating in environments others couldn't survive. Private Danny Wright, his leg still healing, taught hand-to-hand combat to a group of young Altharian recruits. Keln was among them watching. Fortress Crandor was built into the side of a mountain, a massive structure that had withstood attacks for over a century. It controlled the main route between two continents on Dracor Prime, making it strategically vital. The Vrexian Empire had been trying to capture it for 3 weeks without success. Now they were preparing their final assault with overwhelming force. Commander Zekthor stood in the Fortress Command Center, reviewing the latest intelligence. The news was bad. The Vrexians had assembled 10 regiments for this attack, over 15,000 soldiers supported by heavy artillery and air support. The fortress garrison numbered barely 2,000 defenders. "We should evacuate," his second officer, Vrix, suggested. "We can't hold against those numbers." "Evacuate where?" Zekthor replied. "If this fortress falls, the entire continent is lost." "We stand here. Then we die here," Vrix said quietly. Jake Morrison entered the command center, followed by Amy Brooks and Chris Taylor. The human major looked tired but alert. His forces had been fighting for 2 months straight with barely any rest. Yet he showed no signs of wanting to stop. "Commander, we intercepted Vrexian communications. They're planning a major assault at dawn tomorrow. Everything they have." "I know," Zekthor said. "I'm preparing evacuation orders for non-essential personnel. Your forces should leave with them." "You've done enough." Morrison shook his head. "With respect, sir, we're staying. This is where the fight is." "Major, this isn't your fight. Earth didn't sign up for a suicide mission." "Every fight against the Vrexians is our fight," Amy Brooks interjected. "We volunteered to help the coalition. That means standing with you even when things look impossible." "Especially when things look impossible," Chris Taylor added with a slight smile. "That's when humans are most useful." Zekthor wanted to argue, but he knew it was pointless. He had learned that humans didn't abandon their positions. It wasn't in their nature. "Very well. How do you propose we defend against 15,000 enemy soldiers?" "With tricks, traps, and human stubbornness," Morrison replied. He pulled up the fortress schematics. "The Vrexians expect conventional defense. We're going to give them something else." The plan Morrison outlined was audacious to the point of madness. It involved abandoning outer defensive walls, creating false targets, and drawing the enemy into prepared killing zones. Most importantly, it required the defenders to hold their positions no matter what happened. "The moment we retreat, the plan fails," Morrison explained. "Everyone has to trust that the person next to them will hold. That's how humans fight. We don't fall back unless ordered, and sometimes not even then." That night, the defenders prepared. Human engineers, led by Kevin Barnes, rigged the outer walls with explosives and created false strongpoints that would collapse when attacked. Lisa Grant organized medical stations and reinforced bunkers, ready for mass casualties. Danny Wright and his team positioned themselves in concealed sniper positions, with orders to target enemy officers. Chris Taylor walked the defensive lines, checking positions and talking to soldiers. He found Keln, the young Altharian, manning a heavy weapons position with 3 other coalition troops. They looked nervous. "First major battle?" Chris asked. Keln nodded. "I've been in skirmishes, but nothing like this. 15,000 enemies. Don't think about all 15,000. Think about the one in front of you. Kill him, then worry about the next one." Chris sat down next to the young soldier. "You know what humans say before a big fight? We say, 'See you on the other side.' It's our way of acknowledging that some of us might not make it, but we'll keep fighting anyway. That's depressing. That's realistic. But here's the thing. Humans have been in impossible situations for our entire history. We've faced enemies we couldn't beat, disasters we couldn't survive, problems we couldn't solve. And we're still here. You know why? Because you're from a death world? Because we're too stupid to quit," Chris said with a grin. "When things get bad, humans just get stubborn. We dig in and refuse to lose. It's not smart. It's not efficient, but it works." The Vrexian assault began at dawn just as predicted. Artillery hammered the outer walls, turning stone into dust. Waves of soldiers advanced under covering fire, expecting fierce resistance. Instead, they found the outer defenses lightly held and easily overrun. The Vrexians pushed forward eagerly, sensing victory. They poured through the breached walls, advancing toward what they thought were key defensive positions. Coalition commanders reported panic in their own ranks as positions fell quickly. But Morrison remained calm in the command center. "Let them come. Wait for my signal. The Vrexian forces pushed deeper into the fortress, committing more troops to exploit what appeared to be a collapsing defense. They didn't realize they were being funneled into prepared killing zones. The coalition had given ground intentionally, drawing the enemy into a trap. Now, Morrison ordered. Kevin Barnes triggered the first set of charges. The outer walls, which the Vrexians had just passed through, exploded inward. Tons of stone and metal collapsed, sealing the breach and cutting off enemy reinforcements. Simultaneously, the false strongpoints the Vrexians had captured detonated, causing massive casualties. The Vrexian advance became a confused mass of soldiers trapped in narrow corridors and courtyards. That's when the real defense began. Human soldiers appeared at elevated positions, firing down into the confused enemy ranks. They used ballistic weapons that punched through Vrexian armor, causing devastating casualties. Danny Wright and his snipers targeted officers and communications specialists, breaking down enemy coordination. Amy Brooks coordinated the counterattack with precision. Every human team knew exactly where to be and when. They moved through the fortress like they owned it, hitting weak points and retreating before the enemy could respond effectively. The Vrexians tried to regroup, but they were fighting on human terms now. The battle became chaotic, personal, and brutal. This was exactly where humans excelled. Chris Taylor led a team through the lower levels where hand-to-hand combat was unavoidable. The Vrexians were larger and stronger individually, but humans fought with techniques developed over thousands of years of warfare. They used leverage, speed, and vicious efficiency. One Vrexian soldier cornered Chris in a narrow passage, confident in his size advantage. Chris ducked under the alien's swing, drove his combat knife into a weak point in the armor, then swept the creature's legs out from under it. The whole fight took 3 seconds. Never fight a human up close, Chris muttered to himself. We're really good at killing things our own size or bigger. The battle raged for 8 hours. The Vrexians, trapped and taking heavy casualties, finally began to retreat. But the humans had collapsed the main entrance. The only way out was through a killing field covered by coalition weapons. The enemy commander, realizing the situation was hopeless, requested terms. Morrison agreed to accept surrender, but only unconditionally. The Vrexian forces laid down their weapons, shocked that they had been defeated by a force less than a fifth their size. The fortress held, and the cost was far less than anyone expected. Coalition casualties were in the hundreds rather than thousands. The humans had lost 12 soldiers killed and 30 wounded. Considering the scale of the battle, it was remarkably light. But to Zekthor and the other coalition officers, the most impressive thing wasn't the casualties. It was watching humans fight with an intensity that never wavered. When positions came under heavy fire, humans held. When ammunition ran low, they improvised. When wounded, they kept fighting until they physically couldn't continue. After the battle, stories spread through the entire coalition military network. The defense of Fortress Crandor became legendary. 15,000 Vrexian soldiers defeated by 2,000 defenders, led by human tactics and human stubbornness. The psychological impact on the Vrexian Empire was enormous. Their military command issued new orders: avoid direct confrontation with human forces when possible. The creatures from the Deathworld had become the boogeyman of the battlefield, but the humans themselves seemed unaware of their growing reputation. They treated the victory at Crandor as just another successful mission. They cleaned their weapons, tended their wounded, and prepared for the next fight. Danny Wright, now wearing bandages from several new injuries, sat with Keln in the fortress mess hall. The young Altharian couldn't stop talking about the battle. The way you fought, the way you all fought. It was incredible. You never wavered, never retreated. We couldn't retreat, Danny said simply. If we lost, everyone behind us would be in danger. So we didn't lose. Simple as that. But how do you keep fighting when things seem hopeless? Danny thought about it for a moment. On Earth, my grandfather told me a story once. During one of our old wars, a group of human soldiers was surrounded by enemies. They were outnumbered 10 to 1, low on ammunition, no hope of rescue. Their commander asked if anyone wanted to surrender. Not one soldier raised their hand. Instead, they fixed bayonets and charged. That's insane. Maybe, but they won, broke through the enemy lines and escaped. Sometimes the crazy option is the right option. Danny grinned. Besides, humans have a saying, it's not over till it's over. We don't quit until we're physically incapable of continuing. And sometimes not even then. The Vrexian command carrier Dominion hung in orbit above Dracor Prime like a dark moon. It was their largest warship in the sector, a massive vessel that coordinated all enemy operations across 3 star systems. Intelligence reports said the carrier housed over 5,000 crew members, had shields that could withstand sustained bombardment, and possessed weapons that could destroy entire cities. Coalition Command wanted it destroyed. More importantly, they wanted it destroyed in a way that would break Vrexian morale completely. A long-range missile strike wouldn't accomplish that. They needed something dramatic, something that would prove the Coalition could strike anywhere at any time. They needed a boarding action. And boarding actions required soldiers who could survive in the hostile environment of a damaged warship, fight in zero gravity, and operate deep in enemy territory without support. They needed humans. Jake Morrison stood before the assembled Coalition commanders, presenting his plan. The holographic display showed the Dominion and its defensive fleet. The odds were terrible as usual. My team will board the carrier using stolen Vrexian shuttles, Morrison explained. We'll enter through their main hangar bay, which is the least defended entry point because they assume no one would be crazy enough to try a frontal approach. That's because it is crazy, a Dracorian admiral muttered. Yes, sir, Morrison agreed without apology. But humans specialize in crazy. Once aboard, we'll fight our way to the reactor core and plant charges. The explosion will destroy the carrier and damage surrounding vessels. It should create enough chaos for the Coalition fleet to push through and establish orbital control. Commander Zekthor studied the plan carefully. Major Morrison, this is a suicide mission. Your team won't have time to escape before the reactor detonates. We've planned for that, sir. There are several escape pods near the reactor level. We'll use those after the charges are set. Those pods are designed for Vrexian physiology. You don't even know if they'll work for humans. They have basic life support and propulsion. That's enough. Humans can survive in a lot of different environments. Morrison looked at each commander in turn. Sirs, we can do this. We've trained for space combat operations. We're ready. Amy Brooks stepped forward to add technical details. The carrier's internal sensors are designed to detect known Coalition species. Human biology is different enough that we should avoid detection until we're already inside. Our thermal signatures are lower. Our electromagnetic fields are weaker. We'll look like maintenance equipment on their sensors. What about the fighting once you're aboard? Brix asked. 5,000 crew members against 50 humans, Chris Taylor smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. Most of those 5,000 are technicians and support staff. Maybe 500 are combat troops, and they'll be fighting us in tight corridors where numbers matter less than skill. That's where humans excel. The mission was approved, though several commanders looked uncomfortable authorizing what seemed like a death sentence for the human team. Morrison didn't seem concerned. Neither did any of his soldiers. 2 days later, the operation began. 3 captured Vrexian shuttles piloted by humans wearing enemy uniforms and carrying forged credentials approached the Dominion. Coalition intelligence had done excellent work preparing false identities and authorization codes. The shuttles were cleared for landing without challenge. The hangar bay was massive, designed to accommodate hundreds of smaller craft. The human shuttles landed among dozens of legitimate Vrexian vessels. Human soldiers emerged wearing the uniforms of Vrexian maintenance crews, carrying equipment cases that actually contained weapons and explosives. They walked through the hangar like they belonged there. Kevin Barnes had studied Vrexian body language and trained the team to mimic it. They moved with the same purposeful stride, held their heads at the same angle, and even copied small gestures that indicated rank and function. A Vrexian security officer stopped them at the hangar exit. Your authorization? Chris Taylor, who had learned enough of the Vrexian language to pass as non-native speaker, presented the forged credentials. Emergency maintenance team, sent to repair radiation leak in reactor section. The security officer studied the documents with a scanner. For a tense moment, the humans prepared to fight their way through, but the scanner beeped approval. The credentials were accepted. Proceed to Level 14, Section 9. Report to Shift Supervisor upon arrival. Understood, Chris replied, keeping his voice neutral. They moved deeper into the carrier, passing crew members who barely glanced at them. The disguises were working perfectly. Humans looked just different enough from Vrexians to pass as a different subspecies or allied race at casual observation. The team split into 5 groups, each heading toward different objectives. Morrison led one team toward the reactor. Amy Brooks took another to the command center. Danny Wright's team would secure their escape route. Kevin Barnes and Lisa Grant had separate technical missions. It was a complex operation that required perfect timing and coordination. Everything had to happen simultaneously or the plan would fail. But humans had practiced this kind of multi-team operation for months. They knew how to work together even when separated. Morrison's team reached the reactor level without incident. The corridors here were darker, hotter, and more heavily shielded with radiation barriers. Normal coalition species couldn't operate here for more than a few minutes without protective equipment. The humans wore basic protective gear but functioned normally. Radiation levels are high, Lisa warned, checking her scanner. We have about 30 minutes before exposure becomes dangerous. Then we work fast, Morrison replied. They entered the reactor chamber through a maintenance access point. The reactor itself was a massive structure of coils, conduits, and pulsing energy fields. Kevin Barnes studied it with professional appreciation. Beautiful design, efficient, powerful, and unfortunately for them, vulnerable to the right kind of sabotage. He began placing charges at key structural points. These will cause a cascading overload. The reactor will try to contain the surge, fail, and then explode. Total time from detonation to critical failure, 6 minutes. 6 minutes to get off this ship, Morrison confirmed. Everyone understand? His team nodded. They had trained for this scenario repeatedly. 6 minutes was tight, but humans could move very fast when motivated by imminent death. Meanwhile, Amy Brooks and her team had reached the command center. Unlike Morrison's group, they weren't trying to stay hidden anymore. They burst through the door with weapons ready, catching the bridge crew completely by surprise. Everyone down, Amy ordered in the Vrexian language. Now! The bridge officers complied, too shocked to resist. Most of them weren't combat troops. They were navigators, communications specialists, and tactical coordinators. None of them expected enemy soldiers to appear in the middle of their flagship. Secure all stations, Amy ordered her team. She moved to the main command console and began accessing the ship's systems. Her fingers flew across the controls, uploading a virus that would disable communications and weapon systems. It wouldn't last long, but it didn't need to. The Vrexian captain, a large male with elaborate rank insignia, stepped forward. How did you get aboard my ship? We walked in the front door, Amy replied without looking up from the console. Your security is terrible. You're human, very observant. Now sit down before someone gets hurt. The captain's hand moved toward an alarm panel. Chris Taylor, who had accompanied Amy's team, shot him in the arm. The wound wasn't fatal, but the captain collapsed with a cry of pain. She said, "Sit down," Chris said calmly. Humans consider that a polite request. You don't want to see what we do when we're not being polite. Danny Wright's team had encountered the first serious resistance. A patrol of Vrexian security troops spotted them and raised the alarm. The battle was brief and brutal. Humans fought in tight corridors with practiced efficiency, using their smaller size to move through spaces the larger Vrexians couldn't. Contact at Junction 7, Danny reported through his communicator. We're handling it, but they know we're here now. Acknowledged, Morrison replied. All teams accelerate your schedules. We've lost the element of surprise. Throughout the carrier, alarm klaxons began to wail. Vrexian crew members scrambled to battle stations trying to understand what was happening. How had enemy soldiers gotten aboard? How many were there? Where were they? The confusion worked in the humans' favor. The Vrexians expected an assault force of hundreds, not 50. They searched for a major threat and overlooked small teams of humans moving with purpose through the chaos. Kevin Barnes finished placing the last charge on the reactor. Explosives set. Detonation ready on your command, Major. Hold for sync, Morrison ordered. He checked his chronometer. Amy's team needed 3 more minutes to complete their virus upload. Danny's team was still fighting toward the escape pod bay. Lisa Grant tended to a wounded team member who had taken a hit from enemy fire. The injury was serious but not immediately fatal. She injected combat medication that would keep him functional for another hour. Can you move? She asked. Yeah, the soldier replied through gritted teeth. Not planning to die on this rust bucket, Lisa smiled. Good attitude. The minutes ticked down with agonizing slowness. More Vrexian security?